Morning. Welcome to the February 13th, 2026, of the Bay Area Management Board meeting. Roll call.
Mr. Alashewski.
Here.
Ms. Bendixson. Good morning here. Ms. Bernal Leon.
Here.
Ms. Blanchard. Ms. Brown.
Here.
Ms. Burks.
Present online.
Mr. Christ. Mr. Cooley.
Present online. Morning.
Dr. Day.
Here.
Dr. Flelling.
Here.
Mr. Glicksberg.
Here.
Chair Hammer Levy.
Here.
Dr. Hershoren. Mr. Williamson.
Present.
Ms. Crawl.
Here.
Mr. Miller. Dr. Moyer. Mr. Blanchard for Ms. Powers.
Here.
Mr. Pratt.
Here.
Ms. Vogel for Mr. Freeman.
Present.
Mr. Provenzano. And Ms. Tyner. Chair, you have a quorum.
Are there any changes to the agenda?
No changes to the agenda.
We have the minutes from the November 14th, 2025 Management Board meeting. Do we have a motion to accept those minutes? Second? Any comments or discussion on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the meeting minutes from the November meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Is there any member of the public here to speak? Seeing none, we'll move on to our first action item, the annual program-wide audit. Julie Davis is with us this morning, so welcome. And the floor is yours.
Just as a brief intro, as we typically do at this February board meeting, we bring to you our annual audit report for the prior fiscal year, which ended on September 30th, 2025. Ms. Julie Davis is here to prepare our government.
Good morning, everyone. As mentioned, I'm Julie Davis. I'm a shareholder at Rivera Gordimer and Company. I'm pleased to go over the results of your independent 2025 audit for the organization this year. I would like to start off by saying, thank you. So going through an audit process, there's a lot of hard work and effort on top of their normal day-to-day duties. So I want to thank Ed, Jill, Maya, the entire team, as well as your team at your outsourced accountant, Clifton Larson Allen. There's a lot of effort that goes into the audit process and a lot of extra effort. So just really want to thank them. We did get started on the audit process back in December, which was on schedule, and we're pleased to go over the results with you all today, which is our normal goal, is to present this month to you all. And just so you are aware, this is our third year on a 5-year quote as well, so we're right in the middle of our contract period. So for those that have been here for a while, I'm glad to see you all again. For the new members here, you'll be seeing me for another year. So thank you for having us today. With that, I'm going to dive into the results, which start off on page 1 if we move ahead. At the very top is our opinion on your financial statements. So we are prepared to issue an unmodified or a clean opinion on your financial statements. And what that means is anyone who needs to rely upon your financial statements can do so to make an informed decision. As I mentioned, we had full cooperation from the entire team, full access to the books and records, and no disagreements over any account matters. Our responsibilities are first and foremost under generally accepted auditing standards. This is where our objective is to provide reasonable but not absolute assurance that your financial statements are free of material statement. And what that really means is that during our audit process, we use a risk-based auditing approach and sampling materiality throughout the audit to be able to determine our procedures necessary to render our opinion on your financials. Our responsibilities are further under government auditing standards. That's where we're looking at general compliance with laws, rules, regulations, contracts, grant agreements, things of that nature. Please report that we have a clean opinion on that report as well this year. And then finally, the final standards that we follow for you all is uniform guidance. That's where we go in and look at specific grants and contracts that come from the federal government. So this year, much like in years past, we tested the National Estuary Program funds that come in each year. And we test for compliance. Are those funds being spent appropriately? Are you doing proper reporting? Are you following the general program guidelines? Please report as well this year that is a clean opinion as well. I do want to point out that In that uniform guidance, there were some changes this year in the uniform guidance and what we look at. I just want to mention it just for consideration for future years. So we all had about $1.1 million worth of federal funds that came into organization this year. So just from a timing and perspective, the threshold for the need for uniform guidance did increase to $1 million this year. So that threshold might shift up and down over the next couple of years on whether you all have that single audit piece or not. So just want to make you aware of that change that we did implement this year for you all. Moving on to page 2, as part of our audit process, we do look at internal accounting controls to the extent necessary to render our opinion. I'm pleased to report we had no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies or other matters to report to you all today. If you recall, last year's audit did have a material weakness of the financial close process. That was corrected during the year, and it was reported that it was fully corrected as well this year in your audit. And then just listed on the page is a list of other reports that are included in the financial statements. Many of these are just because you're a governmental agency, the type of funds you receive, things of that nature. It's more just informational items. On page 3, we're required to communicate with you all certain items that we did deem to be significant to the audit process if we move ahead a page. So one of the items we're required to communicate with you all is significant estimates. So estimates are inherent in every financial statement that's out there, regardless of whether you're a government entity or a for-profit corporation. We're required to communicate the ones that we deem to be significant. These were the allowance for doubtful accounts, the actuarial assumptions used at FRS, the fair value of investments held, as well as the fair value of the right of use assets and liabilities at the end of the year, which relate to leases that you all hold. We did review all the estimates and concluded they were all reasonable in the circumstances. On the next page, this is highlight summary of other items that we're required to report to you all. This is a page, if there was anything significant, we would not wait to this meeting to report. We would have reached out long ago and had discussions if needed. So I'm pleased to report there are no fraud, no illegal acts, no significant changes, and no audit findings, no uncorrected misstatement. There were some new GASBs that went into effect this year. The first one being for compensated absences, so that paid time off accrual. What goes into that calculation change did not have an impact on the program this year. And then as well as some disclosure changes this year. Again, the main thing that changed this year and relates to that for you all is just some wording changes in the footnotes, but no big significant changes this year. With that, moving on to page 5, I'll go over a highlight of where the numbers ended for the year. So this is the balance sheet for the organization. So starting off at the top, total assets this year, we're consistent year over year, slight increase. Some of the big changes you'll notice are in cash and investments that are considered unrestricted, $172,000 increase over last year. This is mainly just a result of operations during the year. Also, the cash and investments that are restricted increased about $60,000. This is the license plate revenue that came in, so you had more revenue coming in than what was spent during the year. And then the receivables is down this year as well, just mainly due to timing of when those invoices went out and when they were paid at the year. Moving down, looking at total liabilities, they did decrease significant this year, about $290,000. You'll notice the big item there is that deferred revenue decreased about $100,000. Last year, you all received some funds in advance of the expenditures being made, so these were reported as deferred revenue. And then also your lease liability went down this year, as well as your lease asset. That was mainly just due to lease payments during the year and the amortization associated with that. I'll point out that the deferred inflows as well as outflows kind of in the middle of the pages there, those are related to FRS, the pension plan that you all participate in. And then finally, your net position for the end of the year or equity for the organization ended at about $1.9 million, an increase of $187,000 over last year that we'll go over on the next page. So on your statement of activities or income statement for the year, total revenues this year were up about $417,000 year over year. They ended at just under $3.5 million for the year. You'll notice the charges for services increased about $100,000. That was actually mainly due to some in-kind contributions and services that were received and reported for grant purposes this year. But then you'll see the operating grants and contributions were up about $300,000. That was the most notable increase, and those were mainly federal as well as state grant that you all received this year. Moving down, total expenses ended about $3.3 million, or an increase of about $200,000 from last year. Overall expenses were relatively consistent when we were looking at them. One of the big things noted was in-kind services. Again, that in-kind revenue increase as well as that expense increase. a small increase in payroll and benefits, about $60,000 year over year. Payroll and benefits is one of your largest expense buckets. They were about $1.1 million or 32% of total expenses. And then your largest item, which is consulting services that you all pay for others to provide services for you all, is your largest, continues to be your largest, was relatively consistent year over year, about $1.5 million, which is about half of your overall expenses for the organization. Adding in some interest income there, about $16,000 really gave you your net income or change in that position of that $187,000 this year. So overall, mainly some grant changes this year, increasing some services, which is all programmatic related. But overall, it was a good solid year. It was a clean audit and really excited to be able to continue to work with you all. And with that, I'll see if anyone has any questions I can answer.
All right.
Yes. Wanted to extend my thanks to Julie and her team, Elise Leach and Amanda Pina for helping out with the audit this year as well. Our staff, Jill and Maya, helping out as well. So always appreciate it clean up.
Thank you. All right, with that, we have a recommendation that the management board recommend the policy board accept the FY 25 annual program audit report and financial statements.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Questions? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. All right, we're moving on to item number 5, the quarterly financial report.
Yeah, on page 9 of the packet, lists the first 3 months of our new fiscal year's revenue and expense activity. So this is through December 31st, 2025. Overall, a little bit slow pace for the start of the new fiscal year. About 19% of total revenues expected based on the August budget that we passed last year, and about 13% expenses. But that should pick up as we move through, of course, the rest of the fiscal year. You have a couple of footnotes as I typically do, just to bring your attention to some of the line items. Under federal grants, we actually haven't made any drawdowns during that first quarter. We usually wait till after the audit's complete to do an initial draw for the fiscal year. So we actually did one in mid-January of about $200,000 just to let the boards know. Under contributions and donations, we actually already have received about $76,000 in donations. About $75,000 of that we're earmarking for the 2026 Tampa Bay Environmental Restoration Fund project. So that's good news. We're already well ahead of what we estimated going into this fiscal year at $36,000 in potential contributions and donations coming into the program. And then last but not least, just another thing to point out under the expense side, our capital outlays, small equipment, hardware and software. Actually only budgeted about $1,500 for this fiscal year for that line item expense. We've already expended about 93% of that budget. That was due to the need to purchase some analytical software. We're borrowing a license from another agency, and that no longer was available to us. So we actually had to purchase that software to do some of our work. So I'll probably come back at the May board meeting and ask for a budget amendment, in particular for that line item. That will hopefully accommodate some new laptop purchases we need to replace some laptops for staff as well. So I'm anticipating probably bumping that up by $1,000 or so. But other than that, these are the revenues and expenditures for the first 3 months. I'll be happy to entertain any questions if anyone had any. The financial report.
We're quiet today. Nice.
Exciting report.
Friday, numbers, in a group of scientists.
There will be time to talk about stuff that is exciting.
Actually, the council.
No, because then we'll have more to work around for scheduling.
So the recommended action is the management board recommended policy board accept the quarterly financial report. We have a motion. Second. A motion and a second. Any further discussion on this item? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Item number 6, City of Largo joint agreement.
So some good news to report and follow up from the last November board meeting. As you might recall, when we went through our board discussion on our preliminary update to the interlocal agreement, there was a desire for the board for us to reach out to the city of Largo and Largo Department of Transportation to see if they would be interested in officially signing on as a funding partner through the interlocal agreement. As I mentioned at the November meeting, been in contact with City of Largo, and they actually at their city council meeting early December approved a joint agreement, which would officially provide them as a funding partner to the program in our next fiscal year, 2027. That's great news for the program. Helps bring new voices to the table. City of Largo has been participating with the estuary program primarily through the Nitrogen Management Consortium. Them signing this joint agreement solidifies their partnership and seat at the table through our management policy. So we're very much looking forward to their participation. We have a representative from the city of Largo here today. And after once the policy board considers approval of this joint agreement through the course of this fiscal year, City of Largo will be able to participate at our management policy board meetings as a non-voting member. And then in the new fiscal year, as they contribute to the program through the interlocal agreement, they'll actually have a voice at the table and a voting responsibility at that time. So that begin probably at the November board meeting if fully approved by the board. So looking for the management board to make that recommendation to the policy board to approve this joint agreement. I decided to keep that fully with the chair's signature next Friday.
Any questions for Ed? You're killing me this morning. Are you okay with us taking all three actions at once?
Yes.
I am okay. Okay.
Yes.
I like to ask. Sometimes you're like, oh. All right. I'm recommending that the management board recommends that the policy board approve the joiner agreement as identified in actions A, B, and C.
So moved.
Second.
First, second, any further discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Welcome, City of Largo. Want to say anything?
I did not prepare a speech, so we are looking forward to joining, and thank you very much.
All righty, agenda item number 7, draft final third amended and restated.
I tried to get him to leave all the extra stuff off.
You know, I totally get that. All right, draft final third amended and restated local agreement. I'll talk to you for a second.
This is basically a follow-up to the joint agreement that we just discussed. As you all are aware, we've been going through an update process to the current interlocal agreement we last amended and restated back in 2021. As part of the interlocal agreement, there's a 5-year sundown review process where we review the tenets of the interlocal, and if any updates are warranted, then we go through the process of approving that through our boards and then to your individual boards after approval here. So at the November board meeting, we actually brought a draft version that included some of the recommendations that came out of the board workshop last year. Basically outlines sort of the funding protocol as we move forward over the next 5 years for the program. And the largest, I think, change in this interlocal agreement was just basically readjusting the funding tables according to 2023 population estimates, as well as some minor updates of work activity that we did since the 2021 update was officially filed. Things like the 2022 farm plan is now referenced at document. After the November board meeting, we actually passed it on to the partners and asked for any final comments for consideration at this February board meeting. We actually received some comments from both Manatee County as well as Pinellas County. They're integrated in the version that's linked within the packet that you have before you today. Just to give you some highlights of what those changes are, they were fairly minor, but just to give you those highlights, as I mentioned, there was, I think, both from Manatee and Pinellas County, there was a request to reference this as the third amended and restated interlocal agreement, just to, differentiate it from, prior versions that were passed. But aside from that, we are integrating City of Largo into the, funding partner list as well as the tables as part of the of their joinder agreement. That's a little bit of change from what you saw in November. And then there is, various updates throughout the narrative. They were fairly minor, like removing references to using facsimile to transmit things. Clarified the timeline of when a withdrawing party would be at the end of the current fiscal year that they contributed to. Clarified the execution and effective date of the filing of the interlocal agreement, some later clauses. And as I mentioned, we updated the funding table based on the 23 population estimates and City of Largo joined as a funding partner. So we're looking for a final approval from the Tampa Bay Estuary Program Board, and that will allow us to distribute this final copy to each of your individual entities for individual approval at either your council or commissions or within your agencies approval on this. I'm looking to have that occur probably from now into early to mid-summer so that we can collect all the signature pages from each of the entities and partners listed within the interlocal agreement. And we need to get that all filed by September 30th in our current fiscal year before the next fiscal year starts. So that's sort of the goal and timeline. I'm looking for the management board to recommend the policy board approve this final version and then seek your individual approvals. And when you do present the interlocal agreement to your board and councils, I'm more than happy to provide an overview of the estuary program, the value we provide to the region, our return on investment to the region in terms of the work we do. So happy to hopefully facilitate those individual approvals, of course, in the next several months. With that, entertain any questions you might have on the draft final version, but it's fairly straightforward.
Now you just said this, but I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
So you'd like to have the signed, executed agreements back by early to midsummer?
Yeah, the midsummer, the latest. Like I said, it takes us probably a week or two to go to each of the individual county clerks to file it officially. So having all those signature pages in hand to do that is important, probably by the July time.
Any other questions?
And one more. So we'll be receiving the final.
Yep.
Clean
version of the
final draft, third amended and restated interlocal agreement after the policy board so that we can start routing that.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Right. So we have again, 3 actions that will take all as one. So recommendation from the management board to the policy board on the draft final third amended and restated interlocal agreement update as outlined in action A, B, and C. Do I have a motion? All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further conversations? All right, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, moving on to the executive director and staff reports. Ed?
Yeah, just a couple of things to highlight. As I mentioned during some of the board briefings, you've probably seen that there's been a lot of press surrounding a private proposal down in Manatee County. We fielded some immediate inquiries about this proposal, and based on a lot of those inquiries, we actually developed a fact sheet. One to bring this to the board's attention for any desire for further discussion or any action would probably necessarily have to happen in a subsequent board meeting where we put it on the agenda. At this time, our position as staff and according to our interlocal agreement is that we were able to participate in the science and technical discussion around the board proposal, but as staff, we don't oppose or support any individual projects or permits as they're moving through the sort of regulatory processes. If the board decides that they want staff to take a different sort of approach to this proposal, we have to entertain that, but we'd have to do that at a subsequent meeting. As I mentioned, we developed a fact sheet just based on the what we know and understand of the proposal that was presented by the private landowners of the natural resources represented in that region, and we have providing that to each of our individual partners as additional information, scientific information to hopefully inform decisions to the proposal. So just wanted to bring that to the board's attention. I'll pause there. I don't know if there's any additional discussion that this board wants to entertain or pose to the policy board, but happy to now talk about that now.
You know, the timeline for approvals?
So my understanding is that at the current state of time is that the private landowner is making a request for a land use change. And my understanding is that probably would not be heard until probably later sometime this year. That's sort of like the first step to get that approval for the land use change.
There currently isn't even a land use change request in-house. It only had a pre-application meeting, so there's no timeline for approval yet because there isn't a formal request yet.
You have recommendations regarding this development, or is it too early?
We've really only seen the parcel footprint, and so, and like I said, we don't really make recommendations. We basically can be a resource for the kinds of habitats that are out there and sort of how that fits into our framework of the goals that are identified in the Comprehensive Conservation and Management Plan and the Nitrogen Management Consortium Reasonable Assurance Plan and the Habitat Master Plan. So we can provide counsel to Manatee County as they evaluate a land use change request with how whatever specifics, might interface with those other goals that they've committed to. But we don't have specific recommendations for the site right now because there's really nothing other than a parcel boundary.
How did the program collect the data to make the fact sheet? Like, you have the overlay map, like what went into the fact sheet?
So there's a pre-application request that was submitted to Manatee County that had a footprint defined. We geo-referenced that based on the area and then looked at the habitat and resources in front of that footprint.
We use the same SwiftMud land use land cover data that informs the Habitat Master Plan.
So there's slightly over 112 acres of seagrasses in that footprint.
Correct.
And again, we don't know what a dredging footprint might look like, what ancillary channel needs there might be, like, this is literally what's in the parcel boundary.
Yes, this is in the information they submitted. The parcel boundary is actually smaller than this footprint.
Is the parcel up for sale by the landowner? Or they just wanna? Yeah. Typically, in cases like that, Stacy, there's like an agreement between the two parties whereby a sale is conditioned on the land use change.
Like I said, we have a link to the fact sheet, just trying to relay what we know about the footprint and resources that are contained within the footprint associated with the Tennessee Aquatic Reserve. We're providing that as the science and technical information available to those folks that might be reviewing this proposal in the future.
Is the footprint within the aquatic reserve?
I think there's been some state DEP comment that it's adjacent to the aquatic preserve, but not.
The waters are within the aquatic preserve. The land is adjacent to the aquatic preserve because in the management plan, it is listed as a potential future acquisition. So the water, aquatic preserve, the land adjacent to.
And again, all we're using here is information that the landowner has provided to Manatee County that, like Maya said, not officially submitted a site plan of what is actually going to be dredged versus developed.
Good morning, Ed and Maya. This is Chris Cooley with Port Tampa Bay. Just want to clarify for the group that we are not associated with this project. We're obviously keeping a keen eye on it. We're we're very happy with the growth of the cruise industry at Port Tampa Bay, but this is not a project that's associated with any of our long-term master planning. I definitely appreciate the fact sheet. This is, the science, the information that will be helpful for all parties that are interested in this. But just wanted to make sure everybody knows that we're not associated with this project in any form. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that perspective, Chris, and thank you for making your data publicly available so that we were able to include, a little bit of the information about how the cruise industry has continued to grow over the past 10 years or so at Port Tampa Bay.
Absolutely. Been long-term partners, and I know looking at the interlocal agreement, our obligations, they've obviously gone beyond just regulatory, but our main obligations in the interlocal agreement is through our regulatory capacity. And we'll be keeping a close eye on this. There will be some involvement of ports within the Hillsborough Port District, right, to access this location. So we're definitely on our radar. We're appreciative of all of your support and the technical scientific information we can share together. Thank you.
But yeah, we just wanted to bring this to the board's attention because I know it's getting a lot of press. There's like a continued desire to continue the discussion. We just need to know ahead of time before the next board meeting. There isn't that strong desire we move on. Some of the long timers in the room know that this isn't the first time.
I see this true before.
Concept like this has been proposed. So
Yeah, hey, Ed, one more question. Do you anticipate this will be discussed at the policy board meeting on the 20th?
yeah, I'm going to do the same directory report, and if they had a desire to bring it back at the next board meeting, they could act at that time next Friday.
Okay, great.
We welcome any of the management board's participation in that discussion if you wanted to participate in next Friday's meeting.
Okay, Chris, just for your information, we'll be meeting at the SwiftMod Tampa Service office for the policy board meeting. So just up the road.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Maya.
Yep.
Okay, well, as we typically do at this February board meeting, at your places, we actually have a new formatted return on investment document. We did a little bit different this year. Typically in the past, we kind of highlighted a couple projects that were relevant to each of your individual entities. This year, we're just looking specifically at the last fiscal year and sort of our impact in terms of overall expenditures. So it's a little bit more streamlined. Michelle McGregor, our new TVP Science Communication Coordinator, took lead on reformatting this year. So any feedback on this new format and the information contained in it would welcome. But again, we're trying to relate sort of the bang for the buck that the Cherry program provides on a year-to-year basis to each of the partners and some of the projects, major projects that were funded for our prior fiscal year. That I'll entertain any questions or comments on that, if there are any.
And previously, like you were mentioning, you had agency specific, I think so there's not a plan to incorporate that any longer?
So we talked about it. This is sort of the first iteration, baby step of reformatting specifically towards one individual year. My desire, and I've expressed this to Michelle, is to have a little space still calling out sort of projects that are benefiting each of our funding partners. So that's useful feedback that we could incorporate next year.
I think that was good talking points, and I would take back to our leadership and hand back, and I think making it, at least in our case, agency specific, is really relevant. So I would like to see that, something along those lines.
Yeah, and certainly, especially this year, as each of the entities are considering signing on to the amended and restated interlocal agreement, we can make tailored presentations on the impact to each of the entities.
That'd be great.
We'd like to attach these types of documents to the LA that actually goes through review, and the members actually see it, part of their attachment.
Yeah, and we'll be providing additional copies to the policy board members and to their colleagues as well. So moving on, we got a couple of other staff updates. Blake's gonna provide updates on the next two items.
Yeah, so the first thing that I want to bring everyone to is our Baywide Satisfaction Survey. So 2027 is our big year for our comprehensive conservation management plan revision. So for this next year, we're going to be doing a lot of outreach. We're going to be holding a lot of meetings, workshops to really revamp our entire CCNP for the next decade. And so one of the initial tools that we're using to help solicit early feedback from all of our partners, as well as the community at large, is this Baywide Satisfaction Survey. It's designed to get input from folks on some of the progress we've made on certain actions from our past CCNP, identify community priorities moving forward, as well as getting feedback from folks that have been involved with us about their experience with the estuary program, where we can improve over these next 10 years, and their different experiences out and about with nature in the Bay. So this will be open until April 1st. We already have over 800 people that have taken it, but we want as many people as possible, lay people as well as experts to take it. So if you would like to take it or share it within your networks for other folks to take it, it's available on our website. You can access it directly from the homepage. And there's also a link to it in the agenda that'll take you right there with it. The other thing, this past week, we held the first People in Nature Symposium. And so that is a new conference geared towards conservation and social science, specifically in Florida. So anybody who is working in human dimensions of conservation and restoration across Florida. This actually started as a small group of folks, including the Estuary program, but also FWC, UF-IFAS, NOAA, all just kind of getting together and saying, hey, you know, these are different times than we've been working in funding, and especially thinking about other aspects of the economy and things that are all involved in social science research. And so there was a lot of uncertainty, and there was a need to sort of rally social scientists together to come up with strategies for ensuring a better future for people in nature these uncertain times. And eventually, this collection of 10 people grew into over 80 people that were all interested in from across the state of Florida. Researchers, of course, but also practitioners and community members. We have representation from several of our partners, FWC, Pasco County, RBC, Jessica, was here and attended it. We also had a great panel discussion that included representatives Jonah Mick from Pasco County, Jim Bays, who's the director of Stewards for our Urban Lakes, which is one of our Pathway Mini Grant recipients, to talk about co-production among researchers, practitioners, and academics. And so it was really great. It was 2 days. The first day was all geared towards talks about social science work happening across Florida and finding collaborations across researchers and practitioners, with the final day being a series of workshops and interactive discussions to help move us forward. So it was really successful. We got a lot of great feedback and a lot of interest for other folks to start planning future versions of this symposium, as well as folks from out of state that want to create their own state's version of People in Nature. It was great, and hopefully in the next version, we'll see more representatives from our partners joining as well.
Great job on the symposium. Yeah, that's super cool. And then just a question on the survey. I think I got a helpful email from Carrie a couple weeks ago saying, please fill this out, which I have not done yet. I will. My question is, will there hopefully be reminders sent out to the team so that we can get lots of feedback?
Yeah.
Included in that. Okay, that's the plan today, but that will happen.
Yes, so we'll
And
send,
then-
We'll send out one sort of broad reminder to sort of just everyone in our email list, beginning to mid-March. So there's like a few weeks left to do it. And the same way with the people that we reached out to individually. Because it is anonymous, if you have taken it, we'll also get spam from us, but it'll just be, check in.
Thank you.
With the People in Nature Symposium, is there a date tentative for the next one that they're thinking about?
There is not. It took us, granted, we had no idea what it was going to be in the beginning, so maybe a bit longer, but it took us a little over a year to plan it. So unless other organizers are super on top of it, I imagine it might be 2 years.
2 years.
from
Okay.
now.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Next update is related to Tampa Bay Nitrogen Management Consortium. As you all are aware, we've been fairly active on trying to understand how to better manage Old Tampa Bay, of course, the next regional insurance plan. And I was going to kind of give you an update of where the sorting has landed today.
So we've been through a series of discussions with everyone, and sort of the place that we were able to achieve consensus on a path forward was we've talked, if we remember, about potentially changing the numeric nutrient criteria. We've talked about looking at absolute nitrogen loads instead of hydrologically normalized nitrogen loads. We sort of tossed a whole lot of sort of management actions and regulatory changes out there to address the conditions in Old Tampa Bay. But in the end, the sort of consensus point that everyone was able to get to is we understand that nitrogen loading is still got a lot of explanatory power for what's going on in Old Tampa Bay. And so folks were most comfortable not necessarily making changes to the regulatory framework, but instead having more rigorous reporting on those nitrogen load reduction projects that they are pursuing in the Old Tampa Bay segment. And so this was the recommendation that the Old Tampa Bay Working Group was able to come to. They shared their perspectives with the full Tampa Bay Nitrogen Management Consortium, kind of understanding that like this consensus point still is something that needs to be vetted through the Florida Department of Environmental Protection as well as the US EPA to make sure that it's acceptable to them. So we were able to draft a decision memo that sort of characterizes this consensus point that the consortium has come to and poses essentially one question to EPA and FDEP saying, hey, is it acceptable if we continue to demonstrate reasonable assurance by documenting both chlorophyll conditions and the nitrogen load reduction projects that we're committed to as a region. So we were able to get the consortium to approve that decision memo, and we sent it to both DEP and EPA earlier in January, and we've basically asked them to give us a response to this question by early April. And then depending on what those responses are, we'll have to see if, we have direction that it's acceptable to do a reasonable assurance plan as we've always done them, or if we need to sort of go back to the Old Tampa Bay Working Group and come up with a different path forward that meets the needs of both the consortium participants as well as the regulatory agencies. So that's sort of the place that we're at right now. We're sort of waiting on that response. But largely, for everything that we don't know about Old Tampa Bay, I think the thing that has come through all of this research that we've invested in is the relationships between nitrogen loading and chlorophyll are still important. They still hold explanatory power, and those are solid investments for the region to continue to make if you want to see changes in both water clarity and seagrass resources in Old Tampa Bay.
For that update, any questions on that? We'll bring you back another one in May when we get that response from the department.
If I could just say kudos because I know there's a lot of back and forth that, you guys took with all of the stakeholders, partners, and you did really work, I think. Just that everybody came in at the end. So thank you very much for the time. Appreciate it.
That's what we do.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. And then last but not least, I just want to give a reminder and let everyone know that the Tampa Bay Environmental Restoration Fund call for proposals is currently open, accepting proposals through March 25th. The three main priorities to think about as an applicant this year. First one is related to, continue to strive to meet our habitat restoration goals for key habitats and the targets that we developed for 2030 and 2050. The second priority is looking at sort of the functional benefits of restoration activities to the ecosystem. So looking at research that better understands the functional, basically equivalency of restoration projects related to key ecosystem parameters. And last but not least, we're also trying to encourage more investment in innovative stormwater projects in urban environments. Again, this kind of dovetails with what Maya was just talking about and in Tampa Bay. Recognize that stormwater pollution is still a significant nutrient source of the bay, so we need additional BMPs implemented. We want to support through the resources we have available through some of our funding streams. This one, the Tampa Bay Environmental Restoration. If you have project concepts that you think would be good for this year's call, please reach out to Maya or Jessica, our staff. We can kind of talk through those concepts prior to you formally submitting on March 25th, but we'll get those applications in and bring it back at the next board meeting for selection of projects that rank high according to the review. Want to again bring that to the board's attention to get those proposals. And with that, that concludes the executives and staff reports. Step up tap word.
All right, so we had our last meeting, and if you were not able to attend, it's really great. We got an update on, obviously pyridinium occupancy has been a challenge in Old Tampa Bay, but it's been highly variable the last few years, and we had a really great discussion on what might be driving that. We also had a presentation on the disappearance of Alert Up in Tampa Bay and what that may or may not mean. We're going to have a state of the bay here. Mark's going to be later, but we did have that discussion as well. And then something that was new was folks who are considering applying for the Tampa Bay Environmental Fund funding were able to come in and talk to TAC members, present their ideas in like 4 minutes. They have 4 minutes, is that right? They have 4 minutes to tell us what they wanted to do, why they wanted to do it, how it tied to CCMP, that kind of thing, and then ask us our opinion on how they can strengthen their proposals and stuff like that. It's fun. Again, if you haven't been to a TAC meeting lately, we encourage you to join us and to invite others. The TAC advisory committee report is in your package. As you can see, there's again some additional technical reports and peer reviewed articles, 7 open science project and 9 presentations there, as well as some updates on field work and community meetings. So if you have any questions, of course, about that, Marcus is here, can give a review on any of those items. I did want to just kind of tag on to this since it's kind of in the same family of ideas. Like on Monday, our environmental management team is going to be up in Old Tampa Bay again, doing more work on the living shoreline, and we're going to be doing some oyster rag pots. So if you happen to be off that day and want to join us up there to do some volunteer work, feel free to come on up to the park. It'll be a decent day.
The same spot where you guys have been doing with the.
Yeah, I can send you information. Basically, 9:30 to 11:30ish by the ranger office.
So yeah, we have 2 activities going on there. They're going to be doing, some additional work out in the water, as well as making oyster rag pots if you don't want to get wet. For today. So I just wanted to give a plug there for Stacy. All right. Any questions on the technical advisory committee stuff? All right, community advisory committee.
Good morning. We've already had one committee meeting this year. And it was down in Palmetto and it was really successful. We had folks that were interested in us receiving the Golden Mangrove Award for the previous baby grants. And so we heard from several, I think 6 or 7 folks who presented their really exciting projects and got to ask them some questions, and we all learned a lot from them. And we also are thinking of changing the format of the meetings, which I think is gonna allow more folks to bring issues that they think are relevant to their localities, and bring up those issues to the broader group. And I personally am really excited to see that happen. And in the report we have here, we have listed all the media interviews that the TBAP staff have conducted, mostly on behalf of this community county conversation. For your awareness, there are 2 Bay mini grids that have been completed, while 36 more are ongoing. And we're about to convene to review the Golden Mangrove Awards as a review committee. So you can expect to see the results of that.
Thank you. All right, my draft fiscal year 27 US EPA work plan, proposed new projects and budget.
Yeah, so every year we bring to you a draft work plan. We like to bring it to you early in February, and then you'll get to vote on it officially at your May meeting. And that gives us enough time to submit this as the grant application for the EPA portion of our funds to support work over fiscal year 2027. So instead of giving you the whole work plan, which is over 100 pages of ongoing and completed project work, we try to break it down in a small bite of what we're proposing as the new projects for this year. So you'll see here, first, I want to call your attention to every year we solicit from you all an in-kind project. This year, we're looking for a project that you already have funded and going that you think will complete in fiscal year 2027 at a value of around $195,450. That helps to make up the portion of the $850,000 appropriation that we have from EPA that you don't match with cash for as part of your member dues. So I think everybody's sort of taken turns doing that, but if you are aware of a project in your jurisdiction that would meet those needs, please get with Ed or myself so that we can update that portion. You might have heard me say $850,000. We had a minibus that was approved up in Washington earlier this year, which means it's good news for us. We're level funded. I know that's been a concern for everyone. So this new work plan projects are using as a budget assumption that we will get the $850,000 that we're now approved. So that's good for us. On the technical project side, you'll see a lot of projects that look familiar. As well as sort of an emphasis on monitoring programs in general. There is the second year of funding to get an atmospheric deposition monitoring station here within the Tampa Bay watershed. And then some support for the Tampa Bay Observing Network, or TBON, so the real-time water quality monitoring in the Bay. We've talked to you a little bit about this effort that USF has been trying to kick off, and we've been working with them to get appropriate spatial resolution throughout the Bay. We'd like to support some of the maintenance activities so that we can rely on those complementary data sources in addition to the ambient water quality monitoring that you all do. One thing on the technical project side that I like to call your attention to is the Habitat Master Plan implementation. Each year we try and identify an on-the-ground project to help advance the goals that are articulated in the Habitat Master Plan. This year, we're earmarking about $25,000 from the work plan to support the permitting components of the Tire Reef project down off of Pinellas Point. But we're also proposing to supplement the work plan funds with funding from the Tarpon Tag specialty license plate so that we can make sure we have enough funds available to support the permitting costs associated with that project. So just want to call your attention to that. On the outreach and education side, again, you'll see many of our sort of long-term commitments to behavior change and volunteer engagement. And then the big the big item here is that it's that time again. We're going to be kicking off plans for the 8th Bay Area Scientific Information Symposium. And so we want to make sure that we budget accordingly for both venue and food and any kind of logistical support that we might need, as well as to support the publication of the proceedings document, because we know those are important to sort of document the history of scientific progress here in the region. So that's what we are as a staff proposing for the fiscal year 2027 EPA work plan. But you all are our partners. If there are other projects that you have identified in your communities or changes that you'd like to see, this is the time to work with us so that when we come back to you in May and you're ready to vote on it, we have taken into account any needs or preferences that you all have for our 27 priorities. Yeah, Mark.
Can I ask a question on the in-kind project? So is that just new construction projects that we might be doing? Or is that also like maintenance, restoration?
It's any kind of project that has a benefit, it advances the CCMP within the watershed. So that's important for you since part of your jurisdiction isn't. So you know, if it's a maintenance activity, but it is helping, you know, advance water quality goals or something like that, I think that could be eligible.
Okay, and that's just what we're spending. So there's not like a match coming. It's just letting
You're letting us use it as match. And so the requirements would be it's not something that you've already used toward a federal match somewhere else.
Staff incur October 1, 2026 or beyond those expenses. Just to add a little bit more to what Maya was saying and kind of related to what Kelly's mentioning at our tag. We've been experimenting with sort of the brown routines of the Tampa Bay Environmental Restoration Fund project. That's sort of teaser for basically fiscal year. And we're looking at ways, and we're discussing this internally on how best to kind of like competitively select projects for the funding streams we have available to us. Maya likes to say we have awkward sums of money. And I think that's the case both with our work plan funding as well as with Tampa Bay Environmental Restoration Fund. So in the future, we're trying to use sort of the TAC as a sounding board to identify projects that either could fit towards the work plan or for T-Bird funding. I just want to bring that to the board's attention, just to be transparent of what we're trying to do internally to kind of facilitate this process of discussion.
Yeah, I think we'd appreciate sort of your initial take on, you know, if that would be desirable or not, you know, because it would be very easy for us to come to you instead of us as a staff sort of proposing projects for you to look at in February and then approve in May. If we had a process where you all were, you know, coming in and proposing your own projects for the work plan, is that something that would be helpful for you or of interest to you? Or not?
Yeah, I think that's the way we're approaching it now. Kind of like using baby steps of this process and seeing how it works.
How far in advance do you need to, like, would it be a year in advance that you would be looking at project?
Yeah, so usually, like typically how I've approached it is I just sort of try and like take turns approaching each of you, and I know you have different needs so that there's geographic equity. And I usually start to reach out to people in like September, October, so that I can have a paragraph description ready in like December timeframe. And that way, sort of, I have all the pieces set up to bring this to you all at the February board meeting. So it's a little bit more than a year out, yeah.
All right, so Marcus, you're up for a statement.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Kelly mentioned I gave this similar presentation at the TAC a couple weeks ago. So if you saw that presentation there, this is a repeat, which is okay. But we try to talk about the state of the bay each year. There's numerous indicators that we track, understanding status and trends of all the things that we consider inclusive of bay health. So this time each year, I try to compile all of those, and this presentation is going to be a quick summary of that. I typically don't bring up this page when I give this talk, but just to remind you all that this is also on our website. This is the corner of our website that has the state of the bay information. Every couple of years, we do a more comprehensive look back. If you remember, middle of last year, we pushed out a more comprehensive update for the state of the bay for the last prior 3 years. But these tabs down here are things that I try to update every year. A lot of these are updated in January. Some of them are updated middle of the year. Really depends when the data become available. But these are going to be the most up-to-date pieces of the state of the bay that you can always go to and get more information. And there's also some things here that I don't even cover in this presentation, so you might want to take a look at those too. Like there's information about our socials or the funding for that year or whatever. So definitely check that out. And I really don't know if anybody uses these pages, so just wanted to bring that up and mention that is another resource available to understand how we're doing, not just environmentally, but as a program. Okay. So I always start with the habitat report card. If you look on your paperwork there, you should have a printout of that. This is the finalized version, actually. We always we can put out a provisional one because we wait for the final version of EPC's ambient monitoring data to become available. But this one you see there is the final version. None of the numbers have changed from the provisional to the final, but there's two sides to this. There's a management-oriented side. That's the one we most communicate to the TAC. Also to this group to think about how we are working towards creating a water quality environment supported with seagrasses. And then there's the other side, the regulatory side, that is really falling under the jurisdiction of the nitrogen management portion. So two separate report cards kind of showing similar things, but for different objectives there. So I'm going to be talking mostly about management side as far as water quality goes. Our typical stoplight graphic, I know y'all are familiar with this. I talk about this every year about what this is showing you, but just to remind you, we break down each base segment into one of these categories for every year we have data. So green, that's good, stay the course. We've met the management targets for chlorophyll and light attenuation. Red is sort of this caution scenario where we.
Do you have more copies or wasn't?
Yeah, Maya will get that. Yellow is going to be this caution scenario where we've tripped one of the targets for either chlorophyll or light attenuation. Red is, we've exceeded both of those, and that's really where you kind of need to take notice and think about what sorts of projects need to happen to get that base segment back on track. So like last year, actually, sorry, not like last year. This year we were all in the green. I think last year Lower Tampa Bay was in the yellow, but good news is for 2025, Old Tampa Bay, Hillsborough, Middle, and Lower Tampa Bay, all were in that state of course category for both chlorophyll and light penetration or light attenuation here. So you can see the annual averages here, and then the applicable target that were the targets that were defined many years ago that were developed to be basically protective of seagrass and light environment for seagrasses. So that's good. All in the green. This is the long-term summary that you see on the report card. Again, just kind of showing basically the long-term recovery of the bay from the mid-1970s to present. We've been all pretty much in the green consistently for the last couple of years. And I'll explain a little bit as to why I think that is the case, but you can see that we're pretty much in good shape. Also wanted to call out, we have a number of dashboards that are available to you to do these deeper dives into the data. These are also things I update every year or whatever time of the year the data become available. but the water quality dashboard has recently been updated with the 2025 data. You can always check that out for more information about what's going into these products. Okay, we also look at, so this is one half of that report card that goes into those colors, chlorophyll. So this is the measure of basically primary production or algal production in the water column. This is going to be what's responsive to nutrient loads coming in from multiple sources. And this is sort of the long-term annual averages for the major bay segments over time. Again, kind of the same story of recovery of the bay from the 1970s to present, but also noting that last year, 2025, well below the targets, which are these blue lines, and the thresholds, which are the regulatory criteria for these bay segments, and the top dashed line there. So good, that's great. We're well below where we don't want to exceed for 2025. 2024, last year was pretty interesting, as you know, or it's 2 years ago. We had hurricanes come through late in the season that actually pushed up chlorophyll towards the end of the year, kind of flirting with the exceedances of these thresholds. That's why you see this kind of bump up in 2024. But then 2025, much lower, almost similar to 2023, basically. So this is how it breaks down by station. So we use EPC long-term monitoring data to estimate these outcomes. We don't evaluate station level attainment for targets or thresholds, but I do like to show this map for just additional context of where we may have hotspots or areas we need to pay more closer attention to. Again, we do this assessment at the bay segment scale, but each one of these points are chlorophyll concentrations that go into considering what is that bay-wide assessment, or the bay segment assessment. So again, everything in the green. None of these stations really exceed targets except for the west side of Old Tampa Bay here, by the Bayside Bridge, and then one spot down here in the upper portion of Middle Tampa Bay. So nothing really, when I'm looking at this, I'm too concerned about. Pretty much chlorophyll across the board was pretty low.
Marcus, just a quick clarifying question. Are these fixed points in space? Okay.
Yep, these are the 45 stations. EPC monitors many more throughout the area, but these are the 45 that we use to calculate the outcomes for the report card. So we have chlorophyll, Secchi depth, which is used to estimate light penetration, and that's it. And these are the same stations that have been monitored since the 70s. Same location.
Just to add to that, we also rely on Pinellas County, Manatee County depth for the other bay segments at the mouth of the bay as well.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, we also, when we talk about regulatory compliance, when we mostly talk to the NMC, we report on Boca Ciega Bay, Manatee River, and Tarosea Bay. And that involves Manatee County data as well as Pinellas County. So, but for the report card, looking at just the management outcomes, it's just the EPC data. Okay, the other side of this, these outcomes is light attenuation. So this is going to be an expression of how quickly light sort of dissipates throughout the water column. The lower the value, the better. And so this again mirrors the long-term recovery of the bay. Similar to chlorophyll, we have targets for these. There's no regulatory thresholds for light attenuation, but we have targets we consider when we evaluate the different outcomes of the report card. Again, pretty much across the board, we're doing pretty good. I was concerned for a while looking at Old Tampa Bay for the last couple of years. It looked like it was creeping up towards exceeding the target, but we seem to be running in the other direction. Lower Tampa Bay is kind of interesting. I've been keeping an eye on this for the last couple of years. It does sort of, it's quite variable year to year, but it is pretty close to exceeding the target for what we consider supportive of seagrasses, or no longer supportive of seagrass growth. And I think the reason in 2024, when we had Lower Tampa Bay as yellow, was we did have, you see this point right here, was well above target for what we considered appropriate for light attenuation in Lower Tampa Bay. So that's why we were in yellow that year. But mostly for 2025, we're pretty good with light attenuation. However, there was some variability in a couple of places. Again, looking at, again, whole bay, but the individual stations from EPC. You'll see, again, these are the stations where we don't evaluate at the station scale, but looking at hotspots, the ones in red are ones that are exceeding the target for light attenuation in 2025. And so you see a bunch of hits in Old Tampa Bay. It's kind of interesting because chlorophyll, for the most part, was all green, except for one point by the Bayside Bridge. So it's kind of curious. We don't necessarily know what's going on. There is sort of a disconnect, really, between low chlorophyll and potentially higher light attenuation, even though on average we're not really near this target. There are a couple hot spots that are we've noted them, and they're concerned to us in terms of what's going on. It could be something else is driving a reduction in light attenuation, or increase in light attenuation rather. So it could be, change in color or turbidity, TSS, all those things that, aren't necessarily related to outlet growth. So we are looking into that. Something we'll be looking at next year. We'll evaluate this to see if this trend is continuing, this potential disconnect between the two indicators. Okay, so the last couple of years, we've been pretty good with water quality. I always like to show this to remind everybody that at least in the last couple of years, a lot of that has been driven by rainfall that's been lower than normal. This is basically, I think, a watershed-wide estimate that I've got from the Water Management District. I pull their data, I sum it out for all the locations. And then this is just for the last 15 years, but this brown line is going to be the long-term average. And on the bottom here is deviation from that average. So you see 2023, exceptionally dry, great water quality. 2024, wetter than normal, but again, that was just because of the Hurricane Debby in August, and then Helene and Milton in September and October that dumped a bunch of rain in our region. So that's why we were higher than normal. But again, I think a lot of that rain happened late in the season and didn't necessarily contribute to excess phytoplankton growth as it may have during the growing season. 2025 also pretty dry. Not as dry as 2023, but I think that's the main reason why we had pretty good water quality in general throughout the whole bay. So we can't necessarily rely on dry years being the driving force behind water quality. Would be that we switch from La Nina to El Nino conditions, whatever. We get more rainfall and could see more exceedances of the target thresholds that we continue to be vigilant towards. We think about controlling external sources of nitrogen. I want to talk about seagrasses too. So the end point of all this is seagrass. We look at chlorophyll, light attenuation in the context of how it may or may not be supportive of seagrasses. We report on, the water management coverage maps are going to be, the gold standard for how we look at coverage. That comes out every 2 years pretty much. But we also coordinate the Tampa Bay Interagency Seagrass Program, which are our annual seagrass transects that we go out and look at every year. Tampa Bay Interagency Program and multiple partners that monitor those transects. This is showing us basically the long-term trend and frequency occurrence. So how many times different species are observed throughout the whole bay. Not necessarily a measure of abundance, but serves sort of as a proxy for that. Last couple of years, we're kind of trending in a nice direction. We see this dip from about 2016, 17. This is when we saw sort of the reversal in the trend of seagrass coverage bay-wide. It was a big concern, but looks like the last couple of years we are maybe rounded the bend with seagrass. I'm not going to make any promises about what we're going to see with the water management district maps when they come out, but this is at least encouraging from the transect data that bay-wide we are seeing this trend towards potentially more cover. And again, I think that's driven just by back-to-back dry years, with the exception of 2024, where the water clarity has been outstanding. Seagrass had a chance to kind of rebound in a way. This is a breakdown by the major bay segments: Old Tampa Bay, Hillsborough, Middle, and Lower Tampa Bay. For the most part, Middle Tampa Bay, Lower Tampa Bay, and actually this does include parts of Boca Chica Bay, pretty stable. But it's Old Tampa Bay and Hillsborough Bay that are going to be the ones we're looking at most closely, because that's where we see seagrass being more dynamic between years. Old Tampa Bay, we have seen a pretty notable increase in halidue the last year or so, so that's great. Same with Hillsborough Bay. I mean, pretty much any games you see in Hillsborough Bay is going to be driven by Haladuli. Massive increase in Hillsborough Bay, but that is relative. There's never really historically been a whole lot of seagrass in Hillsborough Bay, so this increases a lot for that part of the bay, but not a lot for the whole bay. But nonetheless, we'll take it where we can get it. So that's good. Okay, there was a brief mention of pyridinium. As Kelly mentioned at the TAC, we had Carrie Lopez from FWC give an update on this. She's actually got a manuscript in draft she's going to be submitting pretty soon that talks about this. But we talk about pyridinium a lot because we know it's kind of been the nuisance algal bloom in Old Tampa Bay for a number of years. I like to show this figure because it does show progress. This only goes back to 2014. We've seen it in that part of the bay since the 2000s. But what's interesting, if you look at each year, and again, this is each facet is going to be a year. The x-axis is going to be day of year, and then the y-axis is going to be length. So it gives you an idea of how the bloom progresses within each year spatially. Point is, if you look at 2023, 24, and 25, you see this drop off tail into 2023. Pyridinium blooms, which have historically in the last decade or so been persistent, if it dropped off. 2024, it was noted. They're kind of hard to see. These little yellow points are actual instances where they actually found pyridinium, but not at bloom concentrations. And then at 2025, I think only one instance they found pyridinium, not a bloom level concentration, but one instance the entire year. So there's been a lot of questions about why there has been this drop off. I think Carrie's suggestion is that a lack of rainfall and reduction in the cyst bed in the sediment that serves as a source in the spring when temperatures warm up has contributed to this decline. It's a complicated thing that I don't claim to understand, but that has, I think, been the primary hypothesis. So that doesn't mean, that it won't return in the future. It could be that, we have another rainy year that promotes cysts coming out of the water column into the sediment. That could promote a bloom in the future. So we'll see. But, this is still something we continue to track and consider it potential issue, that we're still looking at Old Tampa Bay. But at least the good news is for the last 2 years, hasn't really been huge pyro blooms. And I don't know if I captured that right about the cysts, but that pretty much the thinking that Carrie had.
It did, and we had a lot of attitude too. About pyro more than us too.
No, I haven't seen Carrie's presentation, but every time we have a bloom, when it settles out, it's going to increase the cysts in the sediments to draw from for next year. But they're not all. I mean, they're resilient. They're not all going to survive.
Yeah.
So, over time, as the blooms get smaller, I can see that cyst beds will reduce the density.
Yeah, the cyst viabilities are upwards of like 20 years, right?
Yeah. Or some, I don't think they're all, but well,
Only other thing that I think in 2024, there was Debbie that occurred, I think in early August that kind of disrupted some of the bloom that was starting to emerge. I think what Carrie was saying, just that could have caused some sediment sort of smothering or resuspension that prevented from the system excising that air too.
there might have been some flushing too.
Yeah.
Carrie's talk is recorded the last TAC meeting. It's on our website. You can check that out. But like I said, there should be a paper that she's publishing next couple of months.
But fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Continue to.
I'm not saying we want to see it, but this is an interesting phenomenon. It's kind of got us scratching our heads, and I think Carrie's got her head wrapped around it as to why this has happened. But I think the message also is that this doesn't mean it's gone. It's just this intersection of conditions last couple of years has reduced the cyst bed and the sediment, and that's why we've seen in the last 2 years no major blooms. But yeah, it's survivable for a long time, so we'll see. Okay, real quickly, I have not yet reported on this particular report card. This is a new one that we developed about 2 years ago, I think, but it's now in the state where I'm ready to start talking about it every year. This is the fecal indicator bacteria report card. This is something that we developed to kind of fill a gap in CCNP where we know we have data behind it, but not necessarily a good way to describe this at a bay-wide scale, right? I want to draw the distinction that this is very different from, reporting beach conditions or some of the monitoring programs around that. This is a totally different purpose, kind of looking at conditions at a much larger spatial scale, kind of how water quality management efforts can support reductions in fecal contaminants as it relates to TMDLs or BMAPs. But anyway, we developed this report card to kind of look at grading the bay segments in terms of their likelihood of exceeding health threshold that Department of Health uses for Enterococcus. So simple grading scheme, lower likelihood, higher grade, higher likelihood, lower grade. And that's how it breaks down by bay segment here. So I had a bit of concern when I first developed this because I think it is a little unfair to show entire bay segments as low scores, because one might, interpret this naively and think that there's fecal contaminants all over that part of the bay. That's not true. What this is really reflecting is just the aggregate grades from these long-term monitoring stations that are measuring basically downstream what's coming from watershed. So that's the idea there. This did start kind of as an idea that that started with the Alafaya and Hillsborough basins that are have that TMDL for fecal contaminants. So you see a lot of stations here. I wanted to sort of summarize those to see what is the aggregate signal, and hopefully this information does sort of help monitoring progress towards remediating some of these subsegment impairments, or understanding how those changes are occurring. So that's there. Welcome any feedback on this project. It's helpful. There's a whole dashboard behind it. There's content on the webpage, but this is the first time I'm talking about it. We're going to continue reporting on this.
I just want to add that we are earmarking some of the funds in the fiscal year 2027 work plan on the outreach side to think about how we more accurately communicate risk associated with fecal indicator bacteria. We know that this is something that gets sort of sensationalized in headlines and in the public imagination, and that this tool, the way that it currently is, might not contribute productively to that. So this is something that we will need, to sort of work through and welcome, like Marcus said, welcome your feedback on, but we'll also be thinking and trying to be really thoughtful about how we can better communicate this information to the public. And hopefully we can be putting together sort of toolkit resources that you all can use and share with your communications folks as well too. So we're not scaring people away from recreating in the bay, which we know is generally much cleaner than it has ever been and delivers a fun time. And so people shouldn't be avoiding it most of the time.
That's the last thing I want to do, is scare people from swimming in the bay. And I realize this might be kind of tough, but your point is well taken, I think, and how we can make this.
Maybe just don't color in the whole base. Just leave the locations where the sampling is done in their colors.
Yeah.
Their colors.
Well, just bacterial.
And what was your source of data? What all sources are you pulling?
I think it's a mix of monitoring stations. A lot of them are from UBC, of course, but they were chosen as locations where there was consistent long-term record that could be used to actually calculate, like, back to 20 years, what is the score, and stations that are persistent in space as well, not moving around. I vaguely recall working with Ed in a big station, so you can blame him.
Yeah, this grading scheme came out of some of the first ecocoliform basin management action plans that were developed by the department, I think in like the mid-2000s. Again, it's trying to look at long-term trends of consistent monitoring stations just for the core constituents that they use to assess impairments for bacteria. So we as everything that has been stated, we kind of know sort of those probably aren't the best metrics to assess true risk related to like sewage. We know fecal Bacteria can come from birds, it can come from wildlife, from our sewer systems, a tropical. All those sort of challenges are manifesting in this report card, and that's why I mentioned that, our next steps is looking at ways we can best communicate this information to the public so they can make an informed decision about their personal risk about recreating the bay, and knowing that not necessarily these fecal indicator bacteria are the best way to relay that information.
Is this pulling from the information that's uploaded to the water atlas for the recreational water quality that like Pinellas County and St. Petersburg and other entities are doing, or is it not? Is it using?
Some of it, it's, I think a majority of it is EPC data, but it depends on, actually the Baywide, the report card, or if you go to the dashboard, there's multiple sections. There's one for like the whole bay like this, but there's also sections for individual counties that have programs. And we don't report the report card for the counties, but rather, actually, yeah, we do. Sorry, it's a station level report card. So it's coming from a lot of places. This Baywide one, I think, is primarily EPC.
So I agree with maybe not shading in the whole polygon of each base segment. Maybe that gives you the cost of security or like Old Tampa Bay looks terrible right now. That's maybe. So maybe just having the stations, and then I would also just ask, what is the driver behind this dashboard? What is the goal, and how does that? There are healthy beaches programs that are out there. There's other information I think that gets published maybe more frequently than just Water Atlas or elsewhere like Department of Health. And so how are we as the industry program? What is what is kind of the job?
Yeah, well, I didn't want to be duplicative with that, and I don't think this serves the goal of informing folks in the perspective of should I go swimming or not. The Healthy Beaches program that does a great job of that. This is really, I think, more aimed at understanding water quality impairments long term. Like I said, in Alafaya, Hillsborough River basins, there's been a fecal contaminant or fecal impairment there for a number of years. This was maybe meant to support some of the efforts of the BMAP to remediate some of those conditions, like looking long term, how, because these things take a long time to remediate. How could this support that? I actually spoke at one of their quarterly meetings and presented it. But there's not impairments all over the water, all over the bay. So it's, kind of where is that middle ground of informing actual, regulatory issues versus just what's the condition of the bay as a whole. Secondly, too, we're also working towards developing a master report card. I haven't thought of a good word for it yet, but going to be inclusive of all of our indicators, and this will be, I think, a regular part of the State of the Bay presentation. And just by the very nature of how we partial up the bay segments into Old Tampa Bay, Hillsborough, we wanted to communicate these indicators in that context, so we can say, hey, we're looking at Old Tampa Bay, it's a B, and you could look at like the individual components: water quality, seagrasses, fish, wildlife, fecal contaminants, whatever. And so it's useful for us to communicate it in this way because it fits in that framework that I think we're going to develop for the Baywide report card.
I wanted to comment on that too. Just for people, indicator bacteria, as obviously bacteria counts are important, and we would want to know that information, but I think having a understanding of the sources of contamination that could be getting vegetation in a creek, because it's not all directly related to human anthropogenic sewer system, is also just maybe something that gets lost in the conversation, especially if the whole facility is the fecal bacteria.
Yeah.
I can promise you all that we're not going to go out and communicate this, and that exact problem is sort of what I'm talking about when I'm speaking about people's contextualizing risk. And so like part of, a lot of you have invested in microbial source tracking.
Yes.
So a lot of this is sort of figuring out, like, for places that maybe have persistent hits for fecal indicator bacteria, what's the next step? You go in and you do a microbial source tracking assessment project and you figure out like, okay, can you identify if it's likely sewage, if it's likely a reclaimed water signal, if it's likely birds, if it's something else. And then once you get that result, then you sort of, you don't just leave it there, you drill down to the next step. So maybe you're preempting some of these, like how the water keepers share these data really routinely, but we know that from microbial source tracking, many of the sites that come up and hit as positive hits for fecal indicator bacteria are in fact not things that are likely to have human health risks. So maybe by contextualizing this over time and space differently and thinking about risk communication, we can change how we're communicating to the public. So we don't just immediately get a hit and then say like, hey, don't do that. We think about like what we know, what the data show, and we approach it in a more nuanced manner. I'll say that like, I don't think the healthy beaches criteria in and of themselves is very useful for the Bay and how people recreate in many places in the Bay. If you're a wade fisherman, if you're a snorkeler, those kinds of things. So that's, I think, why the local government partners have sort of stepped up and provided some of that information. And I think that the Water Atlas like tool that's synthesizing that, we're probably never going to get information to people in a time scale that is truly appropriate for them to make their decisions because of how long bacteria live and persist, right? So what we can do is help educate people about the kinds of contexts which they can make a decision. And so I think the goal for this report card is to, like Marcus is saying, inform some of the regulatory programs that are out there, that places that have TMDLs or BMAPs related to fecal, but then also sort of situate this in this like longer term stepwise process so that we can communicate more accurately about risk. This is not the tool to communicate at all. It is like a piece of the puzzle, and thinking through it as a management community about like which pieces need to, like, are there different data sources? Are there, like it. So we're like very early steps. This is not a front facing thing at this point in time.
Is bacteria data collected in the Bay stations?
Yes.
Yes, and we made the effort to pick specifically locations that were entering Bay as an expression of potential, like going back to Wisconsin source card. This is not going to give you a good solid idea of where it's coming from, but at least it's going to tell you it's upstream of that place. As opposed to in the Bay, it could be from anywhere. That's
Yeah, but I don't know. I'm guessing that the data collected at the Bay stations is probably meeting criteria because
yes.
Well,
it's matters.
I'm saying there because I'm like,
Bay
segment's probably meeting standards, but then we've got inputs that are locations that are not.
Yeah.
So yeah, the coloring of the Bay segments.
Yeah, a lot of this initial effort, I think, goes back to trying to be responsive to what we said as a partner to the BMAP process and what DEP has developed in some of the major river basins, about Alpine, Hillsborough. This report card is kind of developed from that effort. They want to understand if there's actually improvements in those areas, and this is one of the ways to kind of show if there is improvement from this long-term trends assessment and report card. You're trying to go a little bit further and do a translation at the Bay segment level, and that's what Mark's presenting here, but we know all the bumps and warts associated with tips to begin with, and that's what we're trying to work through. That's why we're saying that we don't think this is a very good public facing report card just yet, and how we translate that in the future is still work in progress.
But we know that the community cares about fecal indicator bacteria. We also know that they're underinformed about fecal indicator bacteria. So for us, the kinds of things that make sense for us to sort of provide our skill set on data analysis and communication sort of things to help make the community more informed and engaged about this issue, we think is important because we don't want there to be a disconnect between how we communicate water quality, mostly looking at things like the light environment and chlorophyll, and how the community perceives water quality, which is much more closely connected to concerns about sewage or like pharmaceuticals or, these other things that we don't really prioritize in our communication. So we're trying to toe dip in a different direction.
I think it is a gap, in the conversation. And so I think it is very worthwhile goal to communicate what is bacteria in water, what does it mean, other sources of bacteria as a possibility. I think this group, nobody wants bacteria in water from any source. I don't want to speak for who either, right? And I don't know that the new same thing that anyone will have snow neutral liver bacteria. SSOs.
Yeah,
So
or
like
road
that, yeah.
cross-contaminated
Yes.
pipes that you don't know
Right.
about, like if you can target to that, that's
Right.
helpful.
And just to add one more thing for the conversation, talking about those TMDL levels, I think that is pertinent to combining those two perspectives, right? Is to tying it together in those areas that these areas are, have a TMDL set, have been identified as impaired versus areas that we're tracking and that information is available. So I do think that is a critical component that is missing as well. I don't like the shading either. I'm just gonna add that in there. But I think that's a critical component too, to matching up the public's perspective about how they understand water quality and all the things that we're tracking, that all the partners are tracking, and bringing that into the conversation. So I think that's key to combining those as well. One piece of it at least.
That's a good idea. I like that.
I think it's a good goal too, to have an idea of, like, I think this is helpful for trends through time. If we are seeing an area with an E associated with it, right, that's very likely maybe to exceed the threshold before we get into NPL for that station, for that livid, to work towards, what is the bacterial source, is it pathogenic? And then coming up with like the proactive alternative restoration plan, pre-TMDL, the regulatory requirement would be ideal for not just us, but for, anybody who's in the water.
Yeah, any of these tools are meant to either support existing efforts or help identify priorities where, there could be a problem in the future. So I 100% agree. Just the delivery of the information is important too.
Yeah, and I think that matters too, the sampling points, because if you look at Hillsborough Bay, if it was just the three, getting an A that was being sampled, that bay would look great versus, the Middle Tampa Bay, which has three that look great. So it could just be a virtue of there are more sampling points in Hillsborough and Old Tampa Bay. So that's capturing, more in-depth data. So I think kind of the goal is exactly your point that we're trying to make some decisions based off of trends in all of the areas and be proactive and catch it before, but also understanding that the public is going to look at this and say, oh, doing well, this is a Bay-wide segment of Old Tampa Bay, and that's not the message that we're working on. That's not the data that we're looking at. So good luck. Hopefully this is a good conversation. I knew you guys would talk about stuff. The coffee has hit, we're fully engaged.
So okay. We will continue to work on this. And
Marcus.
Michelle as well.
Marcus, can I say something?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. So Michelle McEachern here, the Science Communication Coordinator. Like Maya mentioned, in 2027, we have in the proposed budget some work on this for public communication. One of the things that I did want to include in that is sort of a partner meeting to discuss this all in depth. So keep that in mind as well. There will be opportunities, and I would absolutely want to engage everyone who wants to be involved in the communication planning. That's it. Thank you.
You have strong feelings about this today. Go to that meeting. Okay. Well, I've got a lot more report questions today. I'll keep it brief. Water quality, again, last couple of years pretty dry, overall pretty good. I did also want to reiterate that potential disconnect where we saw differences between the chlorophyll and the light attenuation in Old Tampa Bay. Again, we'll continue to keep an eye on that, but it is sort of the two indicators telling us contrasting different pieces of information that we need to take note of and try to understand why that is. So we'll continue to look at that. Neptune fisheries. This is one that gets updated mid-year, and it's updated with data from the year prior. So you notice this only goes to 2024. Not a whole lot of change there. This is one that is a multi-metric index. It considers multiple indicators of species diversity, abundance, indicator species that are there, and then roll it up into a single score here. The good news is we've never been in the red for this one. But it is just sort of oscillating back and forth between the greens and the yellows that we try to understand what was going on. But for the most part, 2023 and 2024, there was that switch from Old Tampa Bay from green to yellow and Lower Tampa Bay from yellow to green. We did look into that a little bit. We're not too concerned with those trends. We're basically considering that conditions are pretty stable from 2024 to the prior year. Same with benthic. So this is going to be our index that looks at the health of the primarily invertebrate community that lives in the sediments or near the sediments. This is data from EPC as well. This one also is pretty interesting, where it's basically telling a story of where sediment contaminants have been historically in the sediments over the last couple of decades. So obviously, Hillsborough Bay, where you have a lot of major inflows from Hillsborough River, Alafai River. We tend to see more contaminants there. It has improved over time, but for the most part, we see the benthic index, which is a biological index, responding to that. Whereas Lower Tampa Bay, Middle Tampa Bay, much more exchange. Gulf, the communities down there tend to be more in the green category. And we do, we reported this a little bit differently than we have in years past. We made a slight correction to the annual categories that go into this. We actually use a rolling 3-year average now to account for changes in sampling efforts starting around, I think, 2008 or so, to try to account for that variability. So if you look at past presentations, this graphic might look a little bit different. It does smooth out some of those trends. Okay, another dashboard that we're going to put out there. This is one that I think we talked to the TAC about last year. The contractor I've been working with finalized the product. We're like 99% of the way there, getting it publicly facing. We've got to add in one more critically missing data set to look at invasives within the bay itself, as opposed to the watershed. But this is another kind of tool where it's not the definitive like, this place is riddled with invasives. It's really meant to be like, this is where you might want to go when you start thinking about where hot spots might be, species of concern that might be, the first time it's been noticed at a spot. And so this is a tool to help you do that. And I think when this actually does get public facing on our website, I'll do a more comprehensive overview to the boards or the TAC of what this is actually showing and how it can support management. So look forward to that. Yep.
How does the symbology work on that?
So it breaks down. So these points are going to be individual instances of invasive species, or non-native, rather. Sorry, there's not really a distinction. That's another point that came up in the discussion. But this is from the USGS National Aquatic Species, or NAS. It's an invasive species data set. And a lot of it does come from citizen science reports, like iNaturalist, but it is vetted as being like verified. So the points are locations where something has been observed. The underlying grid is that raster layer is the Florida Landscape Assessment Model, FLAM, which is like a rough index of quality of the landscape that considers multiple metrics of like number of native species, like development, things like that. So the idea is that it's cross-referencing points where their invasive species occur with quality of the landscape to see if there's like hot spots that should be of high concern. If there's like a natural pristine area, see more and more native species coming in, this might be a place where you want to look. And that's where these hex bins come in. These are like the top 50 ranked priority areas where the invasive species occurred and the landscape quality is high. And the dashboard lets you filter these by 50 top priority areas or 10, whatever. So that's the idea.
I'm so sorry, I have another one. So I think that in the TAC, it was discussed on, which I naturally, this is my favorite out, so I'm super citizen science forward. But these are mostly not marine or aquatic species, right? They're mostly terrestrial.
Yeah.
And I think there's also other dashboards that are doing similar things like the SISMA's cooperative use of species management areas and EdMaps, which is also, professionals in the field of invasive species, but maybe even using those databases and dashboards. If maybe the estuary program, if there was a way to focus on push for more data within the marine environments, that would be useful, I think, and again, I don't know that we're tracking these things.
So,
natives as good in water as we are on land.
So the FWC FIM database is one that we're going to incorporate into this. Gary Flaherty-Walia, who co-presents this with me, but she's not here today. She's working on getting that data set ready to be dropped into this dashboard. Yeah. And so not only is that going to be able to track invasive fishes in the water column or in the parts of the bay, but she's developing that, the priority list of and most wanted or whatever, things that are, if they show up, are particularly problematic.
Yeah.
So that's the idea there. So that is, we are going to fill that gap. Cool. And I, during the TAP conversation, you're right. Some of these other efforts did come up, and we will do some outreach to some of those other groups to see, is this complementary? Does it help them? I mean, we don't want to ever be duplicative with things that other people are doing. But again, this is another piece of the puzzle of things that are in our CCP where we know data exists, but it's not necessarily tailored in a way to report specifically for our watershed that can be rolled up into a more comprehensive assessment of environmental quality. Okay, last part, I promise. Carrie does a lot of work each year looking at working with the Habitat Restoration Consortium. In particular, getting a list of projects from all the partners to upload to the GIPRA or Newport database that goes up to EPA to show progress that we're doing towards habitat restoration. And so we report on this every year. These are the numbers for 2025, broken down by native habitats here, total projects, total acres, and total miles. So this gives you a sense of how the effort breaks down by type. These acreages, don't be misled by them. This is not necessarily that 14,000 acres of uplands have been acquired. It's just that this might cover things like maintenance activities, like brush fires or invasive species. This is a number of the projects over time to kind of see how we compared last year with 2024 and prior. Slight drop in number of projects, but overall that long-term trend is looking good. I think we had 66 total reported projects. So if you're doing something and you haven't reported it to us, please reach out to Gary. And these are restoration projects, not necessarily ones like the Action Plan database, like the Action Plans. And this also gets rolled into a report card. We also published a 2-pager habitat report card that's online. That is very similar to our water quality report card. But the idea here is that our partners doing these great projects, they're reporting to us every year. Ultimately, that information will translate to noticeable changes on the landscape where we're assessing progress towards targets and goals under our habitat master plan, where we have acreage targets and goals for the different native habitats. And so this report card summarizes that progress towards those long-term and short-term goals in our habitat master plan using large land use cover maps in the district. And so each individual point here is basically green or red if the target for 2030 is not met. And the arrow says whether it's trending above or below that target. That kind of gives you a sense of not just status, but how likely are we to either maintain that if we've met it, or reach it if we're not meeting it, or any combination between. So what we do with this report card is not just see how the watershed is doing as a whole, but we use it to identify priority habitats each year that we say these are particularly important. If you have opportunity and resources to do so, to pursue projects in these particular native habitats, do that. And for this year, these are the 3 that were chosen, and we actually had a more involved process that Carrie developed to identify these priorities. In previous years, it was just what's red and trending below. Last year, it was more complicated, so we actually developed a workflow to do this. Here you have that Restoration Consortium, and these are the things that are priorities for this year. So if you're considering submitting something to TBERF, one of the priorities was goals towards the Habitat Master Plan. These might be things to think about if you have a project that can focus on these native habitats. So that's it. That's a lot. So any questions?
Great work.
I think one of the things Marcus would be curious on your feedback about is, as he's working towards sort of the report card to end all report cards, it's just sort of like proliferating these things, and this presentation gets longer. Is this helpful? Are there parts of it that maybe are not as actionable for you, or sort of, just sort of your temperature on that is helpful for us, because we just keep making it longer and longer.
Well, before you get answers on that question, I do want to mention and a shout out to the work that this estuary program does, because there are some of us that sit on other estuary programs as well. And I will mention that Sarasota Bay is looking at adopting some of these indicators as well. So I think that first of all, congratulations on setting the bar, right, and doing that work that they're going to use as an example in that estuary program. But that it is useful information, at least some of it. And obviously they're not going to do all of the things that we're talking about here. And there's some ideas on the table now that we're discussing, but definitely the Necton and the Benthic for sure are going to be, they're looking at adopting. And I think it just speaks to the work that is done here in Tampa Bay. So I just want to mention that before partners chime in about usefulness, that there's also another program looking at that it is useful and they are looking to adopt.
I have some comments. Yeah, many of your summaries do have some actionable value. Some of them may not be clear immediately how they're going to be used, but a nice, consistent, transparent summary is always appreciated. I really question the value of the FIB one from my perspective, but there might be something there eventually. The restoration one, you have to start somewhere, and the watershed is a reasonable target for restoration. There's going to be a lot of restoration projects in the watershed before it disappears under urban landscape.
Maximize the opportunity.
Yeah, the same thing. A nice smooth transition to coastal, and then even underwater resources would also be relevant.
I think the work is helpful. I think the more information, the better. So having all of the different types of information we're collecting and trying to summarize and put together is good. There may be some things about the presentation on some, but yeah, I think
it's always going to be a work in progress, and I think we as a program believe it's better to present things with all its warts and bumps than to not present at all, especially if there's data. That's my job essentially, is to do that, and I can't do that. That type of feedback is really the information I need to make sure that it's actionable and communicated in a way that's true to what our goals are as a program and the benefits people that.
Is there anything that estuary program needs from us as the management board to help you all kind of gather all the information and kind of put it in one space? I think it's awesome. Water quality report our goals.
Yeah, I would just say, I think we wanted your continued input as I've challenged Marcus to think about sort of this comprehensive scoring of the bay. If we're gonna have to distill all these individual things into something that everyone agrees upon is a true score representative of all those individual metrics. So
Okay.
your continued input on that process can be important. If we're missing the mark when we're distilling it down to like an A, B, or C, A, Y, and we need to hear that.
Yeah, there's gonna be a lot of discussion. I invite people to participate when we're ready. We're getting closer to those returns.
Any other feedback? Thank you, Mark. All right. Hiya. No, quarterly report, progress reports to the boards.
Linked in the packet is just a summary of our progress implementing all of the different projects that we manage, not just those work plan projects, but other grants as well. As always, if you have questions about those kinds of things, I'm happy to dive in deeper with you. I do want to call your attention to the next meeting is going to be held on Thursday, May 7th, here at the Regional Planning Council. It's a little bit off cycle just to accommodate the Regional Resiliency Summit and other NEP board meetings as well. So Thursday.
Is the policy board meeting the next day?
Yes.
And they will also be here.
And the policy board meeting on the 20th, February 20th is gonna be at the Swiftman. Correct. Yeah. So just if you have policy board meetings, or if any of you are attending the policy board.
Yeah, policy board meetings this year are rotating locations. So in February, they'll be at the Southwest Florida Water Management Tampa Service Office. May, they'll be here at the Regional Planning Council. August, they'll be at Seaport Manatee, and November, they'll be at Brooker Creek Preserve. Y'all will be here every time. Right.
Any other announcements anyone wants to share? Yes, ma'am. I just want to let you guys know that new AVs will be installed here next. So we're gonna have these fancy things that we can all hear each other and
Fancy, not fancy, functional is what we're going for.
functional, not, it's fancy is anything above what we have right now. So there's actually gonna be mics, gooseneck mics, and easily operated little dashboard for you. So, and it should be fine with our Zoom capabilities and all that good stuff. So, it's been a journey.
We appreciate the space.
Oh, gosh, yeah, future of the region. We talked about it, but yeah. Guys, call for entries is out. Please, for those of you that don't know, TPRPC does an annual awards event recognizing projects and programs around the region. It's in conjunction and happens on the luncheon that you can attend separately from the summit. We hope you all go to the summit too, but it's part of the summit. But you can also attend just luncheon. Please think about your projects and programs. It can be nonprofits, public sector, private sector, great categories to choose from. It's not hard. It's a 250 word application, all online. We'd love to have you guys participate, and it's a fun luncheon. And this will be our 33 years we've done this. No, just missed COVID, but other than that, we're at 33 now. Hope you'll join us.
Due March 20th.
I think that sounds right. Marcus?
I was gonna share a good news story. We've been working hard on our illicit discharge program. children is starting to put out some new lines and address things. So we actually had company's corporate lawyer come in. They admitted default, paid a $42,000 fine, and their company's behavior is markedly changed. So, well, that was a pretty big success story. And actually, the irony was there's a number of other projects in the area where they're working now, so it's put us on our toes too to make sure everything's kind of uniform across the board. So, good news story.
I'm gonna share a weird one. So, and I put this out there because it might not, it likely won't be where it's proposed, but we received a request from the Army Corps of Engineers to host a permit application meeting that occurred last for a very unique project off of Pinellas County shore. Every federal regulatory agency was represented, state as well, county, Clearwater, to construct a underwater hotel with a capacity of 1,500 people. Obviously, you know, every entity had the opportunity to lay out the challenges associated with something like that off of the Gulf into the Gulf. However, they still are very really wanting to move forward projects somewhere. And so I don't know where it might be proposed next, but they thank us very much for all the feedback and want to really keep working towards this project.
They don't want to put it next to the cruise terminal, do they?
I don't know, but I just wanted to share. Yeah, it was a very long 3-hour plus hours, Marcus, discussion, and it yeah. So if you'd like to see the presentation, we can share it. But I just wanted you all to be aware because they're very, very interested in doing this, and we laid out that it likely was not feasible in Pinellas County, but they are still very interested in finding a location where it's more compatible.
I'll take them.
Well, there was a, they are another country, so there was an error in they're very used to meters versus feet. Okay, so the location that they chose was 12 feet deep. They needed 12 meters. Okay, so that gives you a perspective. They need 12 meters, which is, in where we are, you don't get to that depth until about 5 miles off of our coast. However, our regulations go out 9 miles. Off for Pinellas County has, authority 9 miles off the coast. So, like I said, they're still very, very interested in doing this, and so it might show up somewhere else. That was my share. Can you share the? It's a public record, so yeah.
26.
Sure.
All 250 slides.
250 something slides. Oh, goodness. And y'all went to. Well, go on, let out. Yep. So, no, they were very, very kind people. They listened intently. Like I said, they're not from here, so it's just not having an understanding of, maybe how the rules and regulations have changed over decades, and they see our history here, and they see the dredge and fill that occurred, and so it's not maybe understanding that we don't do that anymore, and why we don't do that anymore, and the rules and regulations that have been put into play over the years that have said, that's really not good for the environment. So it was a lot of exchange and a lot of learning. So, you know, like I said, they still very strongly believe that this is a viable project in the right location. So, yeah, that's, again, well, public record now, we've had the meeting and the presentation and everything, so it's, we share that too. Yeah, I think yes.
Not that fun.
It's all like that.
You want?
Well, if there's nothing else to discuss, we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you.